I'm thrilled to be at a hearing or subcommittee hearing that has nothing to do with crypto.
Amen.
Under capitalism, if you, through the sweat of your brow and your frugality, you accumulate capital, you're encouraged to invest in the American economy and to become a shareholder. This is important for two reasons. First, it is the lifeblood of our economy, and making sure the capital markets work well as markets for the entire country is of critical importance. And second, it is important to save for your retirement. This Congress needs to do something with regard to Social Security, but Social Security has never been the answer, the sole answer to retirement. And in fact, this Congress and all of its predecessors have put our money, or the taxpayers' money, where our mouth is when it comes to saving for retirement. We have forgone hundreds of billions of dollars of tax revenue by giving tax incentives to people who will save for their retirement. So it's important that we make sure that these savings mechanisms are efficient, both to achieve the individual goal and the goal of the overall economy. And a critical role in that is played by mutual funds, whether it be the traditional mutual funds or the ETFs. These products have strong regulatory protections and allow Americans to diversify without having to become experts in the balance sheets and income statements, et cetera, of every public company. So if we want to encourage something, we should learn from Baskin-Robbins. If you want to encourage something, give people choices. Imagine how much less ice cream would be consumed if Baskin-Robbins had only one flavor. So we need to offer mutual funds that are across the economy and those that pick a sector. And we need to have a choice between index funds and active funds. Now, it's true that index funds offer lower management fees, but if you have an economy exclusively with index funds, how do you know what stocks are worth? And do you just calcify the index? Index funds can't be effective if there are not also selective, well-educated investors, and much of that comes from managed mutual funds. Now, two other points I want to make. One is about the investing in China. I do not believe that index funds, and perhaps mutual funds in general, should be just indexing in China, especially according to an index. Couple of reasons for that. The first is we've got a lot of index funds that are not even buying the companies that fit the index. They're instead buying not Huawei, but a variable interest entity in the Cayman Islands that has a similar name to the big Chinese company. That is not investing in the large company, and in fact doesn't come with the rights that actual shareholders have. A second issue is whether the unique risks of investing in China can be dealt with by paint-by-numbers index funds. And finally, I am concerned that there are 144 sanctioned companies and their affiliates that have made their way into emerging markets funds. Most of these companies have been found guilty of violating human rights. Some of them play an integral role in the Chinese military-industrial complex. So while I'm all for index funds, I'm all for managed funds, I am not for blindly investing in Chinese companies, let alone Cayman Island entities that share the name of a Chinese company. And finally, and I know we'll get this with the witnesses, we need to allow shareholders to vote. Management doesn't own the company, shareholders do. And to have a system that says that all the shares in a mutual fund are not voted at all unless the individual shareholder of the mutual fund decides to exercise that right individually, ignores the fact that if I want somebody to manage my investments, I may choose to also have them manage the voting rights. With that, I yield back.
And I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Sherman, for 5 minutes for questions.
I ask unanimous consent that we enter into the record statements by Mr. Bob Pinsani, the famous CNBC correspondent, as well as Professor David Clayton Brown of the University of Arizona.
Without objection.
So we're here to talk about protecting investors, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, to allocate capital in our economy. And I think that Ms. Johnson has pointed out, IPOs are not in index funds. IPOs are perhaps, if not the largest, at least the most important transfer of capital to companies that are going to grow and employ. And it's not just the investors who are dependent upon our capital markets, it's everyone in our society. So if we don't have actively managed mutual funds, then mutual fund investors aren't going to be participating in IPOs, and IPOs are critical not only perhaps to their investment success, but more importantly to the economy. And as I think you point out, if we don't have active investors, we don't know what the price is, and also we don't have anybody inspiring management to do the things that make the company more valuable if the value of their stock has nothing to do with the performance of the company and everything to do with the fact they happen to be in an index. I want to commend Mr. Quadman for pointing out the importance of the Growth Act so that mutual funds will be treated in a similar tax manner as ETFs, and commend the gentlelady from Missouri, our chairwoman, for mentioning the INVEST Act, which is stuck in the Senate, further proving the fact that we would do better with a unicameral legislature. We want to save trees. The way to do that is not to send a lot of paper to a lot of people that don't read it. In fact, e-delivery is for many people, including myself, better, because when I get the paper, I throw it away. Okay, I put it on the kitchen counter, and then it gets stained with my tea, and then I throw it away. Whereas what I can search for in email, I can read whenever I'm bored, and that would never happen at a hearing of this committee. So, Mr. Quadman, why is it important that the SEC focus on e-delivery?
For many of the reasons that you just said, it's a little unbelievable. It's 2026 and we're still arguing about the need for e-delivery. But obviously, this is the way that people communicate. And in fact, a survey that ICI released last year, 87% of senior citizens who are investors prefer e-delivery as their default mechanism of communication. So it's time we get into the 21st century.
Ms. Renta, thank you for bringing up, among other things, the importance of not having multi-classes of shares. All shares should be equal, but unfortunately, some are more equal than others. This needs to be the focus of a federal law, because otherwise you have a race to the bottom as every state tries to please management and disempower investors. We live in a capitalist society, but actually the most powerful people are not the owners of the capital, but the managers that control it. We have a bill proposed to us that would prevent mutual funds from voting shares unless they were told by their shareholders how to vote. Ms. Johnson, we recently passed, unfortunately, through this committee, a bill that would differentiate between passive and active mutual fund managers when it comes to voting proxies. I can understand wanting to let the individual shareholder decide how their proportion is voted. The vast majority don't. So should both active and index funds be able to cast the votes of the shares held in those funds in the absence of specific direction from their shareholders?
We believe it's very important for both active and passive managers to vote their shares and to not delegate that responsibility, whether that's to third-party proxy services or even to individuals who are holding passive funds. There's very little take-up of those options, and we think it's very important not to relinquish that right. Our firm takes the proxy voting process very seriously. We vote all of them individually based on our knowledge of the individual companies and the circumstances that pertain, and we think that's one of the most important functions that a fiduciary provides.
And without that, there'd be no pressure on management to do what's in the interest of shareholders. Thank you for taking the time to individually vote the shares held in your funds, and I yield back.